This is Tell Me What to Read, the podcast from booktopia.com.au. I'm Mark Harding, and today I am chatting with some of my fellow Booktopians about the best books of 2021. So welcome to Ben Hunter, Sarah McDuling, and Shanu Prasad.
Hi, Mark.
Hi. Ben is with me in the studio. Shanu and Sarah are dialing in from home, and we're going to dive straight into talking about the best fiction of 2021. What would you say, Ben?
I would say we had a heck of a year for fiction, Mark. We sold more fiction books than we've ever sold before at Booktopia, and a good part of that reason is just the sheer quality of, it'd be gratuitous to say, product that was put into the market. We had some incredible debuts. We had some incredible short stories. We had new voices that I read this year that blew my mind. I have to give a small shout out at the very top to an author, Adam Thompson, who's a Tasmanian Aboriginal man who wrote a book called Born Into This, and that is just, I still think about that novel, and it came out in January or February, I think. But I'm going to talk about, because of time, I'm going to talk about two massive novels that came out this year that dominated sales, are dominating sales right now, and I think speak to kind of two pillars of what's going on. One is that people are just reading a lot. And there's incredible blockbuster books coming out. And when we talk about incredible blockbuster books, particularly incredible Australian blockbuster books, we cannot not talk about Apples Never Fall by Leanne Moriarty. She is known among us as the Queen of Australian writing, and I think that is an apt title. Apples Never Fall is a brilliant new novel. It is all around a family. There's a family business, and there is a suspicion of murder which divides the family apart. It's commercial fiction, but it is commercial fiction done at its prime, because she kind of talks to a kind of universal condition, the stresses of family, the stresses of the world of empty nesters and aging, and kind of looking at the relationships you have with your parents, and looking back on their relationship to one another when you, as a child, become an adult. There's a lot of stuff going on in this novel, and it's just propulsively readable. There's a lot of tennis, and it's brilliant. Like she's just, there's a reason she's the best. Sarah, you're on the phone, and you had to interview Leanne, which is a privilege and a wonderful honor. What kind of glory did you glean from her?
I love Leanne Moriarty. I've made no secret of that ever, and every book she ever writes, I love. This latest one is just absolutely hitting all the notes that I expect from a Leanne Moriarty book. It has these characters that you can't help but invest in. It has humor. I love her humor. She always manages to create funny dialogue and funny situations whilst these characters are caught up in dreadful situations. I thought what you said, Ben, about because the book sort of deals with 4 adult children who, I guess, in a lot of ways kind of are suffering from some arrested development, and then the course of the novel forces them to review their parents' marriage, I guess, and start questioning things and wondering. It's all balanced so perfectly. I gobbled it up. Like, I couldn't stop reading this book. I found it really, really addictive, and one of the most fun, captivating books that I've read during this Christmas period, I think.
Yeah, well said. How would you say it for people who maybe aren't devout Leanne fans like yourself, but maybe they've read Big Little Lies or seen a bit of the telly show, or there's the new adaptation of Nine Perfect Strangers. How would you say that that this book rates amongst the Leon canon?
I feel like look, every time she has a new book, I feel like it's my favorite one of her books. So I've felt this way every single time. For me, I thought it is easily as good as Big Little Lies, which I know is a lot of people's favorites. I loved Nine Perfect Strangers, but it's a different, I guess that book, if anything, is a slightly different kind of kettle of fish. It was, for one thing, it wasn't in the suburbs, and most of her other books are in the suburbs. And it sort of got a bit meta and did some interesting things in that book, which I absolutely loved. But if you are a person who kind of read both of those books and preferred Big Little Lies, I think Apples Never Fall is going to be definitely your wheelhouse.
That's good to hear. I love that that idea that you just fall in love with Leon again and again every
time. Yeah, every book that comes out, I'm like excited to read it. I have high expectations, and as we all know, like sometimes expectation management is key, because when you go into anything with high expectations, it often can't match what you were expecting. But she just always raises her own benchmark with me, and every book she comes out with, I'm like, oh, I think this is my new favorite.
That's the relationship you want to have with an author. I love it.
Yeah.
Mark, I'm going to talk about one other fiction title. I could talk about so many, but there's a book that has captured the hearts and minds of the staff in this building, and the staff working remotely at home. And that book is called Devotion. It is by Hannah Kent, who is the author of Burial Rights and The Good People, another Australian author. And it's the first book we've had from Hannah Kent for years. Hannah's had time away. She's had a couple of children and been married. And what Hannah Kent is known for is writing very tight historical novels that follow established historical fact and persons very closely, and niggles into the cracks and finds the kind of untold stories of women, and she does that just so well. And this book is like that, but it also breaks free of the bonds of historical realism, and moves into a place of joy and love and spirituality, I'm going to say, and just sheer brilliance. And just this book is a love story. It begins in Prussia in the 1800s, in a community of old Lutherans, of a devout Christian sect, who are largely persecuted by the monarchy there, and they are going to emigrate or migrate as a community to South Australia, the colony of South Australia, to sort of start afresh in this whole kind of new world migration that's going on. And in this very closed community, there's a girl, Hannah, who has this beautiful bond with nature. That is her like lifeline to God. That is and the writing of this is incredible. And in this very kind of closed community, another girl comes into her life, and her family is just on the edge of this Lutheran community. This girl's name is Thea, and they form a bond, and it's a love story. I'll say no more than that. It is the most heartbreaking, spectacular thing. It is, you could say that it's overwrought and wild and audacious, and I love every word of this novel. And I think I'm speaking for other staff in the building as well when I say that the reaction has been the same.
I've never read Hannah Kent, but I own copies of The Good People and Burial Rights. I've just never picked them up. They're just on my eternal to read pile. How does Devotion stack up to her other work?
So as I was kind of alluding to, there's a brilliance of she writes prose very, 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 very well, world class prose. In this novel, what she's done is just broken away and just found a love and a joy, much more so than her first two novels, which are very dark, right? And this new story has a lot of darkness in it too. I won't shy away from saying that. But I think the course of the pandemic and the political turmoil of our time, natural disasters, and the fact that marriage equality got through and Hannah was able, the author Hannah was able to get married and start a family. I think these have all been factors that have just kind of pushed out this new novel, and it's an evolution for her, and it's a thrill to read. Go and get it. Devotion, Hannah Kent.
And you had a conversation with her on this very podcast, I believe. Did she give you much of an insight into how long it took her to write this one, given that she's had a bit of time away?
I think it was something that she began research for many years ago. She kind of grew up in that Adelaide Hills part of the world where the Germanic community is like just written into the colonial history, and it's in their language and it's in their food. It's everywhere, and so that's always been front of mind for her. She also expressed a sense of trepidation about writing Australian history because of the horrors of colonial conquest. And it was a big step for her to go closer to home and to look into our First Nations history and first contact, and how do you pay respect to that as a white author? That's really hard. So that was part of the challenge. So it's years in the making, but I think the final product came very, very quickly.
Yeah. Sarah, have you read Devotion, and do you have anything to add to Ben's wonderful review of it?
I have read it, and I absolutely fell deeply, deeply in love with it. I feel like I'm treading on your territory here, Mark, by making this pun, but I'm going to say I'm devoted to Hannah Kent.
I love it.
And this book, I mean, as Ben mentioned, I want to steer right clear of spoilers, but I will say, it's somewhat of she does some different things in this book, some things that you might not expect if you have read her previous books. And I think, she's amazing at research. She really researches because she writes historical fiction, she researches it. And then I really feel like she has this magical ability to time travel you into those worlds and those places and get you to fall for these characters. And, she writes a lot of dark subject matter, but because her writing is so transcendent and beautiful, she just casts a spell over you. So this book, I love it. I know I will read it again many times. There are lines from this book that when I read them, I feel like they're now etched on my soul. Like there are just sentences that hit when I read them where the testimony of love is the backbone of the universe. Like that's gonna, I almost want to get it as a tattoo. Like I just feel like when you read a Hannah Kent book, it's kind of like every sentence is something that you would tattoo on your body. Like it's just, she's just out of control in the way that.
Sarah, would you get that tattoo like Jared Leto Joker style, like across your forehead?
Yes, I feel like I would. Well, I'm going to run out of room because she has a lot of great sentences. I'm eventually just going to be covered in Hannah Kent's writing. I just don't. I wept and wept when I read this book. But
in a really cathartic way.
Beautiful, yeah, it's beautiful, wonderful. It's such a beautiful love story. there's a sort of turning point in the story around about halfway through, and from that moment onwards, I think I just had tears in my eyes for the whole rest of the reading experience. And it is joyful and heartbreaking and breathtaking and just sublime. Like, I don't know, Shanu, I'm going to pass over to you because I feel like even just remembering this book is getting me really emotional.
Yeah, well, I felt the same as you. So I had the same reactions and the things that really struck me. But what I loved about it as well was just this, and I've never read any other Hannah Kent books, but I now have gone and gotten the other Hannah Kent books to read over the Christmas break, because I was like, oh my God, I can't believe how beautiful this story was. And I just loved that blend of really, like you said, really feeling like you were in the world that she is writing about, but at the same time, you were an observer of that story. You felt like you were part of it, but also observing it, which is kind of what sort of happens a little bit in the book. So it's really amazing that she can make you feel so many to be in so many places. But it was this like love and connection with nature, as well as love and connection with another person, that really struck me as just the way she wrote about it, and the way the characters sort of interacted with nature. Like, I did not want to leave Prussia, and then when I got to Australia, even though I live in Australia, I felt like I was like experiencing a place I'd never seen or heard about before. And I just thought that was so impressive to do that. And like you, I wept. I read a lot of books this year, like a lot of books, because we were in so much lockdown. That's all I did. And this was the one that I was like, I think I messaged Ben as soon as I finished, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is the one that has made me feel all the feelings. Like, there's been so many other amazing books that I've loved this year that I thought have been so clever and interesting and well written and explored topics, but this is the one that just like, yeah.
It just strikes right through you, doesn't it?
And it's the one where I was like, you have to all read it. Everyone, go and read it. Please read a copy of this book. It was so beautiful.
It's the right book at the right time.
I opened up my Word document that I created while I was reading the book to keep track of all of the little parts of it that I love so much. And when you're talking about Hannah's connection to nature, there's this other line that she has when she's talking about, like, why do we even bother building buildings or anything when we've got nature? And she has this line that's like, baptize me in rainfall and crown me in sunrise. Like, I just want to say that every morning. Like, I just want that to be my new daily affirmation. Anyway. Yeah.
That's also a nice insight into the level of nerdery that is required to work at Booktopia. You can't just read the book; you have to have a Word doc open in the background where you're making notes as you go along.
It's a shared Word doc with her tattoo artist.
Yeah, pretty much.
Her Instagram.
I just have a little note. Sometimes when I'm reading, I just grab my phone, I open notes, and I type a line in because I don't want to forget that line. And I would never do anything so like crazy as to underline it in the book. That would be horrible.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your thoughts on that. I'm going to throw over to you now, Shanu, because you're going to talk about the best non-fiction and lifestyle of 2021. What, in your opinion, was the standouts this year?
Well, there were, again, like fiction, so many. And so there was a real fight about what books we were going to actually mention on this show. But, what actually made us make the choice was not just, how great the books were, but that they really fit into this kind of overarching theme that we've been finding throughout the year, particularly in the nonfiction space. That is, it's all about love. Stefania's written an excellent intro to her top 10 books, which basically just says 2021 was the year of love. And it's so true. And it's so wonderful that is the year of love, because 2021, let's be honest, was also the year of many, many, many other less enjoyable things. So the first book that I'm going to sort of say is one of the kind of real standouts for everyone at Booktopia was everyone's favorite author, Trent Dalton, and his new non-fiction book, Love Stories. This was a book that as soon as we heard about it, we were all super excited, even though we knew nothing about what it was about. And then as we found out more about what the actual book was and the content of the book, we were excited. Then when we saw what the book was going to look like, we were even more excited. And then when we got to read the book, we were like, mind's blown, this is amazing. So basically, Stefania gave me a little, because she's, it's the book that she's been championing all through the year, and it's the one that she's, pushed forward to become our, was our book of the month. And she got to interview Trent Dalton, which is always like, it's great that we get to interview authors. And I think Ben can attest that what a generous interviewee Trent Dalton is, and what a joy he is to interview. And it's a joy just to listen to it. So if you haven't listened to that podcast, I highly recommend that you do. Basically, the story, Love Stories, is not just one story, it's many stories. And the best story of all is how the book came to be. So Trent Dalton was at a funeral of a friend's mother, and she ended up leaving to him a blue Olivetti typewriter. And he wanted to do something to both honour this woman who had given him such a wonderful gift, and also to give a bit of a middle finger to COVID, let's just say. Luckily, he was in Brisbane, so he was in a better opportunity and a better place to do that than some of the rest of us. And so basically, he just sat on a street corner in Brisbane for 2 months, and just with his typewriter, and just said to people, tell me a love story. And so that's where it began. Where it ended, though, is something that I think only Trent Dalton could do, right? Because you have to be such an open, inquisitive person yourself, and have this heart for wanting to know other people and know other people's stories, to be able to really get to the truths of what other people's love stories might be. And the book is not just, your traditional love stories. I should know, because I've been watching a lot of Hallmark movies lately, which are just all, romantic love. But it's, love of family, love of friends, fleeting love, everlasting love, soulmate love, just all sorts of different kinds of love in all of its forms. And I think what's, and I think, people that have read it will attest, is that it's not a book that you sit down and just like open up from page one and just read straight through, because there's so many people's like real life stories in there that you really have to like read one of the stories and just sort of sit with it and think about what it is, and what it is about love that you're finding out from that story. And so it's the absolute, oh my God, and the packaging is just so beautiful. So it's like the best book to give to someone else as a gift, but also to give to yourself as a gift, like to give to others and to give to yourself as a gift. It's just like the whole package. And it's just really amazing that he can write such great nonfiction as well as such incredible fiction. A little bit jealous of how talented he is, but yeah, this has been an absolute firm favorite, and I can see that it's going to be on like best-selling lists for eons to come. So I'm not sure if anyone else has had a chance to dip into it yet, but
yeah, well, dipping in is the word, Shanu. It's Stefania called it the perfect handbag book, is you can crack it open and just read a love story while you're on the bus, and that's a gorgeous thing. Particularly coming out of this year of intensive reading, where we've just had stretches of time alone and in the quiet of home. Getting out into the world and keeping up a reading habit is difficult. This is a great way to do it. This glorious little thing. Personally, I've had it by the bedside, and my partner Rose, she says, "Ben, story time," and we'll read aloud a love story before bed each night. And it's great. It's great stuff to read aloud, because Trent has a sentimentality and a candor and just an Australianness that just rings true in every sentence he writes, and it's gorgeous stuff to just sample.
Something that I've been thinking about with this book, because I haven't read it myself, but I want to. Does it make you reflect on kind of the love stories that you've experienced in your own life, and does it make you kind of contemplate what your conversation with Trent would have been had he stopped you on that Brisbane street?
I found myself, asking the question like, "Oh, how would I answer this question if I ran into a Trent Dalton on the street?"
And I think one of the most...
Yeah, go on, Shanu.
Oh, I was going to say, one of the most interesting things is, when Stefania and I were talking about it and about why she'd picked this book, she was mentioning how Trent had told her that there were so many people that said, "Oh, no, I don't have a love story. No, I don't have anything." But then they'd sit down anyway, and then it would turn out that even though they thought they didn't, when they started talking, they would realize they had one. And I thought, what a beautiful thing that is, that you might go through life thinking, "Oh, I don't have that kind of, that's not me." And then you find out that it is. And like, what a life-changing event that could actually be to have someone actually go, no, you do, like you are special, you are loved, you are important. And especially in this year where a lot of people have not been feeling that. And I thought that was wonderful, especially as well as, the fact that people were coming back and going, can I just tell you just a little bit more about that? I just remember something else. And I just think, isn't that wonderful? Because he was there. They knew he was going to be there, and they could come back and just keep talking to him if they wanted, and he would listen. So
I'm going to give myself that book for Christmas. That's my present to me.
Yeah, I was gonna give it to my mum, but maybe I'll just keep it.
Just get another one, Mark. You can buy more than one of the same book.
You can buy more than one book. Yes, you can actually at booktopia.com.au, no less.
Yeah, multiples of the same book if you wish.
What else was a standout non-fiction this year, Shanu?
Okay, now this is one from the same publisher. Actually, they're just swinging it out of the park, kicking it out of the park. I'm not a sports person, so those metaphors may not be correct when it comes to beautiful books that celebrate life and love. And when I first heard about this book, I was a little bit skeptical, not because I didn't think that this author would be capable of doing it, but I was just like, do we need this book? Is this a book that we actually need in the world? And the book that I'm referring to is Where the River Bends, Recipes and Stories from the Table of Jane and Jimmy Barnes. And having a copy of this book next to me, I can resoundingly say we 100% needed this book, and we definitely needed this book this year. Is there anything that Jimmy Barnes cannot do? I call him Australia's Renaissance man. I just think, what a genius. I mean, not only did Jimmy Barnes write a cookbook this year, or co-write a cookbook this year, he also wrote, and we have sold a lot of, one of, I think, the most charming kids' books that I've read this year, picture books, Rosie the Rhinoceros. And I would highly recommend, if you have any young people in your life, or you just like to read picture books yourself, which I do, that you get yourself a copy of that as well, because it is an absolutely glorious, wonderful story. But we're talking about, Sarah is nodding profusely and saying, yes, please. It's very true. And a number of people I know have already gotten it for their children, and I have certainly bought a couple of copies for children that are in my life. However, I'm here to talk about not that book, which I do love, but the cookbook. And Where the River Bends is one of the most beautiful cookbooks, I think, that has been produced this year. The quality of it is so high. It has the most gorgeous cover, and the cover is of actually Jimmy himself kayaking in the river, which is near his place, which is down in the Southern Highlands. And I tell you, it makes me want to be rich so I can buy a beautiful, beautiful place in the Southern Highlands as well. Because the best part of this book is that it's recipes, sure, yes, recipes, but it's the stories. And it's the stories, it's the family stories, and it's the stories of Jane and Jimmy and their extended family and their cook. They have a cook who has contributed recipes to this book as well. And so the recipes kind of like, they run the gamut of like, there's a whole chapter on potatoes, which is, from Jimmy's.
He's Scottish. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's right. So there's a whole chapter. Chapter 7 is potatoes, spuds, and tatties. And I mean, me as a potato lover, being half Irish, I'm very, very happy about a whole chapter that's just on potatoes. There's also a chapter on Thai favorites, that's come from Jane's side, and then there's this amazing recipe for a cake that's come from from their cook. They've got chapters on like breakfast and lunches and pasta and sweets and pantry basics and everyday dinners. So it's just like something for everyone in this book, and something for when we are able to, the fact that we are now able to sort of gather together. And it was, with more than just the people that in our household. So we get to share the love of cooking and the love of preparing food for other people, which I think is so wonderful. And also, Jimmy Barnes has said that one of his favorite recipes in this book is the recipe for his, which sounds crazy to have a recipe for it, but recipe for his gravy. And I don't know about you, but I would trust Jimmy Barnes's gravy as being the best gravy recipe. So I'm certainly looking forward to, on Christmas Day, making that gravy recipe to go on our roast meat. So sorry, vegetarians.
I think you need to have a Paul Kelly Jimmy Barnes gravy off potentially.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, maybe we could have Jimmy Barnes record Paul Kelly's song, and then that would be like a nice marriage of the two things. But yeah, you get like the recipes, you get gorgeous photos. You really feel like you're actually there with them. in their house, and the recipes are beautiful, but they're not complicated. Like you can make them. You can this book is just so much better than anything that they didn't have to make it this good, right? It would have sold being less good just because of who it was, but I love that they've just made it to the absolute highest standard. And 100% this book is like one that you don't tuck it away on your shelf. This is one of those ones that you just leave out casually. Like, oh yes, me, yes, I just have these cookbooks that I just kind of all the time, but you will. It's really good. And best part, all cookbooks should have them. It's got one of those little ribbons, so you can put your ribbon into the place that you're into the page where you want to make the recipe. So important, guys. So important to do that. It should be like that. That's what I'm going to say about
Good to end on a practical note.
I think so.
Thank you, Shanu. We're rapidly running out of time here. Did you have anything else on the nonfiction front you wanted to highlight before we move on to Sarah and the kids' books?
Well, I mean, in the theme of love, I think another book that I was definitely enjoyed by many people in Booktopia was Clementine Ford's How We Love. And I know that Sarah, yes, Sarah was a huge fan of this book. Yeah. And I think this just, again, speaks to the fact that, authors, particularly in the nonfiction space, really wanted to celebrate life and celebrate the good things about life this year. And so we got to see and read so many wonderful stories that were really life-affirming and heartwarming and made you appreciate being alive.
Truly, yes. And she really is so open and vulnerable and takes readers into her every awkward, real moment of her adolescence, and then carries all through life, just examining love and the ways that the love you have for others, and perhaps even more importantly, the love affair you have with yourself, and how you cultivate self-love as an adult, and try and dismantle the ideas you have about yourself that are not loving. It's a gorgeous book. It was exactly a book I needed to read this year. And Clementine Ford just blows me away. She's so wise and warm and loving, and I think that comes through so strong in this book.
There you go, Mark. It's all about love.
Wonderful, and we love to hear that. So I wanted to tell you about another podcast that's been created specifically for book lovers. It's called The Books That Changed My Life, and it's hosted by the creators of the Shameless podcast. Here's a quick sample.
A listener exclusive.
Books give us so much. They can make us laugh, cry, escape our reality, or bring our life into sharp focus. Plus, they're just nice to be around.
I would often get on a string of buses with the pram and go into central London and go to different bookstores just to be, just around books, because as we all know as readers, that's completely life-giving.
I'm Michelle Andrews.
And I'm Zara McDonald from the Shameless podcast. And in season 2 of The Books That Changed My Life, we're talking to 8 more fabulous people about the books that changed their lives.
And through those books, we'll discover so much more about them.
We will learn about resilience from swimmer Shayna Jack when she faced accusations of taking a banned substance.
I've been through something that potentially people don't go through at all in their life, and I'm not going to let that destroy me. I'm actually going to let it benefit me. If you can look at yourself day in and day out in the mirror and be proud of who you are, you're doing it right.
We'll learn about failure from very successful author Meg Mason.
Sorrow and Bliss came after the failure of a previous manuscript. So my children witnessed that and saw what that looked like to have someone think that her career had come to another end. But then they saw me, start over. And then they've also been able to see the book succeed to the extent that Harry Styles' girlfriend was reading on a super yacht, which is, that's a marker, isn't it?
We'll learn about representation from our brilliant friend and producer, Annabelle Lee.
I just thought it was so new for me to read a character, an Asian woman who was not meek and demure. And also her interactions with some men were so vivid for me, because I have experienced so many similar things in the dating world where they just see you for your race and what they expect will accompany that Asian female stereotype. It was just something I'd never read before. We'll learn about finding your voice and owning your truth with journalistic powerhouse Lisa Wilkinson.
There have been a lot of lies printed about me over the last few weeks, and all I could do was just wait, because when you read the book, you get everything in context. I'm just going to play the long game here. Because you can either get down in the mud and react to everything, but then you end up just covered in mud. And I just don't want to live my life like that.
And we'll learn what it's like to have Nicole Kidman want to option your book from Leanne Moriarty.
I can always remember saying to her, well, I know not to get too excited because this may or may not happen. I thought that would show her that I was sort of, I understood the way this industry works, that I was cool, it's okay. And she said, no, if we option it, get excited.
Plus, there's conversations with author and journalist Jamila Rizvi, magazine editor Justine Cullen, and everyone's favourite comedian, Will Anderson.
I can't recommend this book enough. I think it's just so beautiful.
Shameless presents The Books That Changed My Life Season 2.
Available exclusively on Listener. Download the app now to listen for free. Listener.
Sarah, now that you've stepped up to the plate, what have you got on the kids front? What stood out this year?
Okay. Well, it was an amazing year for kids' books, and it was really hard to kind of narrow this down. But there were two in particular when I was looking at the cream of the crop that I felt kind of really sort of hit the zeitgeist in their own individual ways and struck a chord with people. So the first one, I'll go in chronological order. So earlier in this year, if you can try and remember the first part of 2021, when the government really helpfully created a video to teach people about consent using milkshakes and tacos, and the internet kind of exploded and everyone was like, this is not helpful, government. Luckily, as though some kind of crazy foretelling people with their fingers on the pulse, the wonderful Yumi Steins and Dr. Melissa Kang had a book in the works that came out just shortly after that whole, what should we call that? Mess? That whole mess? Yeah. And that is Welcome to Consent by Yumi Steins, Dr. Melissa Kang. This is the second book in the Welcome to series, which is just rapidly becoming like such a favourite with schools and libraries. These books are, we started with Welcome to Your Period. We then had Welcome to Consent this year. We're going to have Welcome to Boobs next year. These books are amazing. A lot of it is to do with Yumi and Dr. Melissa's sort of frank, open style, where they just kind of lay things out in a fun, accessible way. These books are great for, the age range is sort of, I think officially they say Welcome to Consent is for around about 11-year-olds to 14-year-olds, but they've also openly said that it's really probably appropriate for kids as young as 8. And like, consent is a huge thing in publishing at the moment. Like, we're finally getting a great amount of publishing to teach kids about consent, which we just didn't have. I mean, certainly there were no books like that for me growing up. We haven't seen it until recent years. And it's so important. This book is just like wonderful. Like, I actually, when I was flipping through it, I actually felt like, it's weird. I mean, I've just been talking about how all of these other fiction books and non-fiction books have made me cry. Welcome to Consent kind of made me a little bit emotional. And it's a weird thing to say, but when I was flipping through it, I just couldn't help thinking how beneficial this would have been to me as a kid, and how, ways in which I probably would have handled things differently if I had been taught this stuff when I was young. It's so important. And I don't know, there were a lot of conversations around the time the book came out of when is too young to be teaching stuff. There's no age too young to be teaching kids that bodily autonomy. Like, it's not all about sex. I think that's the thing in this book, is that, yes, obviously the conversations in Welcome to Consent are a lot to do with sex, but it's not only that. It's about bodily autonomy and just learning when you are able to say no and when you are able to say yes. And like, that's an important thing for children to learn. Like, they use an example of a T-shirt. So they're like, if you have a T-shirt and someone wants to borrow your T-shirt, if it's your kid's sister who's like, can I borrow your T-shirt? It is very easy for you to say no. Or, if it's someone that doesn't have any power over you in your life, you can quite easily say no. But the second the power shifts, maybe it's a slightly older kid and you've got a big crush on them and they want to borrow your T-shirt, and you're worried that if you say no, like, they won't like you. Or what if it's an adult? Like, what if an adult wants to borrow your T-shirt? They could be a teacher, they could be a figure of authority. Like, how do you handle that, and how do you make those negotiations? Vital book, really amazing. I'm so glad it's published. I hope that it spawns 1 million like similar books, because we should be flooding the market with this. There should be so many options for kids. So yes, Welcome to Consent. That was a big book of this year. And then the other book that I thought really also struck the zeitgeist, really got people excited, was The First Scientists by Corey Tutt. So Corey Tutt, for anyone listening who isn't familiar, is the founder of Deadly Science. He's a STEM champion, and he was also named Young Australian of the Year in 2020. He has, along with illustrator Black Douglas, created this wonderful book, The First Scientists, which is all about the deadly inventions and innovations from Australia's first people. And this is kind of like similar to a lot of the information that people may have been introduced to in Dark Emu or Young Dark Emu. Kind of follows through, but finds a really fun, really, again, accessible and gorgeously illustrated way of presenting all of the innovations and all of the science practiced by First Nations people that I was never taught about at school. Again, like, thanks a lot, Australian education system, really failing in the 90s to drill this information in, because I don't think that I ever knew any of this stuff. It's only as an adult that I've come to learn. The book covers things like ways in which First Nation people use the stars to in tracking and in how to track seasons and time, how they managed land management, inventions like the boomerang, like fish traps, like resin. I had no idea that the earliest inventions of resin was with Australia's first people. There's so much in here, and it also, through the book, kind of follows through to now and shows you how these inventions and this knowledge that has been passed down through generation upon generation is still being used and practiced today. It's a beautiful book. It's brightly coloured and wonderful. And when I first heard about it, I was really excited, and I thought, oh, this is going to be huge. And again, we were talking about expectations before. It sort of outdid my high expectations and just sold even more than the high number that I thought it might sell, which gladdens my heart. I hope both these books, The First Scientists and Welcome to Consent, are just in every school across Australia.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to interview Corey Tutt earlier in the year, and he's, again, I think there's a theme with some of the authors that we've spoken about today, disgustingly talented and charismatic, and just a wonderful person who deserves every success. And both of those books you've mentioned are really important. I think I think I might be the only kid haver on the podcast today, and I've got both of those books for my daughters, and they're just sparking really important and ideas and conversations in our home. So yeah, absolutely important, wonderful books there, Sarah.
What an excellent kid haver you are.
Yeah, I forgot the word parent for a second there. Anyway, well, thank you so much, Ben, Sarah, and Shanu, for sharing the best of 2021. You can find links to all of these books in the show notes for this episode. You can also head over to our website, booktopia.com.au, where we are celebrating the best of 2021 at the moment, and we have much more extensive lists than the titles that we've spoken about today. We've just shared highlights, and there's a lot more that we go into a lot more depth on the website and on our blog, The Booktopian. So as always, thank you for listening. Never stop reading, and this is actually going to be my last turn as podcast host for Booktopia, as I am off out of the company and onto a new adventure. So it's been a pleasure talking to you all for the past couple of years, and thank you all so much. And did I already say never stop reading? Never stop reading. That's the thing I say.
Aww. We will miss you.
Thank you.
I'm so glad I found a way to put a really terrible pun into this last podcast.
It's appreciated.
In honor of you.
Yeah.